Jim, no. Hey everybody, this is Jim, and that is Marcos. Um, he's my friend. Um, I'm an educator. I'm a writer. Um, Marcos is a musician. I draw a lot of inspiration from his work, and I hope that he draws a lot of, at the very least, amusement from my work. um, and what we want to do today is share a short story that I wrote. This is the first short story that um, that I published, and it was published in 2012 in the Y Files, which is not a big um, online magazine. And I and I wrote the first draft, I think, in 2009, and I read it in front of my undergrad um, creative writing class called The American Voice at Fordham U, and it had a interesting reaction. So what I want to say first is, um, I wrote this a long time ago. It's it's funny, right? It's supposed to be funny, but it's a little bit dark humor, um, you know, and I'm sure there are things there that are not like politically correct or whatever. That was my sense of humor. Like I like Chris Rock. I like uh, I like Dave Chappelle, and well, I think it's valid, to critique maybe some sensitivities that they might not display or whatever. I think, um, and also I want to say that should I write it today, right, I would write it a little bit differently. And if it's funny to you, then that's awesome. If it's not, I'm sorry. Wasn't trying to be mean, but here we go. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share it. Um, and the reason I'm going to share it is because I want people to be able to see the words. I will be posting this as a podcast on my podcast host, and this is the story. If you are looking at it right now, it's about 2,000 words. Um, right, but a lot of that are notes actually, and this is an interesting story because there are a lot of notes in the story that it sort of explain the notes. And I want to talk about the notes, but I think I want to talk about the notes afterward. So when I say notes, I mean footnotes, explaining some references to theoretical physics that I was obsessed with as a kid, but popular theoretical physics, like I wasn't a physics major, but like Michio Kaku and the people on TV talking about science. And I thought that was really cool. And so the story is called Tim and the Parallel Worlds. Originally published as Jim and the Parallel Worlds, this is called Tim and the Parallel Worlds. Uh, yeah, I changed it from Jim to Tim. I think there's a pun here on time, and I call myself Jim, so it's a little bit confusing for some. Tim and the Parallel Worlds. Tim suddenly found himself in a parallel world. Tim knew that was the case because he had noticed how the things around him had changed from how they had been before, when he had gone to sleep. A sure sign that something was up. This was not a new circumstance for Tim, having found himself in many a parallel world before. Tim's mother would often warn the boy about this sort of thing. "Watch where you're going, Timmy," she would shout. Tim never listened, though. But this, space-time, was different. Tim was fed up and determined never to allow himself to get so lost ever again. Tim was going to keep his eyes open from now on, forever. Suddenly, Tim saw his grandfather. Tim's grandfather looked a lot younger than when Tim had last seen him. Something was up, Tim knew. An urge then fell upon Tim, not of malice, but of a scientific kind of curiosity, to kill his grandfather. Reaching into his pocket, Tim discovered a gun. He tried to use it to shoot his grandfather. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The gun had misfired. Evidently, something was stopping Tim. Tim felt as if he had lost something from within. Confused, Tim lost interest. Tim decided, or so it would seem, to sit down for a while. And, despite his better judgment, Tim closed his eyes. Sure enough, Tim fell fast asleep. When Tim later woke up, everything had changed again. Suddenly, Tim saw his grandfather. This is what the French refer to as déjà vu. Tim didn't know that, though, not having taken any French. Recognizing the significance of the moment, Tim pulled out his gun and aimed. Though some may find it disturbing that a kid like Tim should be carrying a gun, remember the old adage, better safe than sorry. Fortunately, Tim shot his grandfather, who died instantly and didn't suffer, so don't worry. Tim then felt the world change. Tim felt as if he had gained something from within. Feeling free, Tim kept on walking. As luck would have it, Tim stepped into a hole. Tim didn't know it was there, of course, because holes are invisible. Falling all the way in, Tim didn't even bother to struggle, knowing, pessimistically, that he was already beyond the point of no return. Coming out the other end, Tim was now somewhere, or somewhen, else. Suddenly, Tim saw his mom. Tim's mom looked a lot younger than when Tim had last seen her. Tim thought she was kind of hot, so Tim asked if he could kiss her. Okay, she said. Though some may find it disturbing that a son should desire his own mother. Remember the old adage, honor thy father, and, especially, thy mother. Nevertheless, Tim could not shake the strange feeling that this woman, despite appearances, was not really his mom. Anyway, perhaps out of guilt for killing her father, Tim decided to propose. Okay, she said. Eventually, they got married, bought a house, and had kids. Predictable. Tim felt pretty awesome. Tim was doing what he wanted to do, including his mom, without anything stopping him. After several years, Tim got bored of the married life. Who doesn't? And decided to leave his mom/wife and siblings/kids. Tim got into his convertible and drove off, never to see them again. Serendipitously, Tim found a gun in the glove compartment. Tim had forgotten all about the time he had purchased and put it there after having decided to kill himself because the marriage was driving him crazy. We've all been there, but ultimately decided against it. The gun had collected a lot of dust over the years. Tim put it in his pocket in case he later changed his mind about killing himself. Tim hit the convert button and the car changed into a starship. Tim wanted to get as far away from everything as possible. Tim was traveling really fast in space, but no matter how fast he went, whenever Tim looked out of the window, there was always a beam of light passing him by. Show off, Tim thought. The time away actually helped clear Tim's mind, for he had decided to come back home to his family after all. However, when Tim returned back to the Earth, 1,000,000 years had passed. Intelligent machines now ruled the world, and there were no humans left. Tim looked at his watch. Tim was only gone for a few hours. Tim was pretty bummed out. Tim needed people in order to determine how good to feel about himself. Eventually, Tim learned that the intelligent machines had built a time machine. Predictable. The time machine essentially was an immensely spinning cylinder in space. So Tim got back into his convertible and orbited it until he got dizzy and passed out. Later, or before, when he came to, Tim realized that the time machine wasn't there anymore. Frustrated, Tim decided to head back to complain and tell the intelligent machines that their time machine didn't work. When Tim got back, though, there were no intelligent machines to be found. Predictable, Tim thought. Then Tim saw people again, many of whom Tim knew he was better than. Tim was pretty stoked. Tim decides to live his life in this here now and change the world. Tim still receives letters from his mom/wife and kids/siblings on occasion, but Tim doesn't write back. Tim was already paying child support and felt that that was enough. Besides, the whole situation had become awkward all of a sudden. This time around, Tim ended up marrying a robot girl, though he didn't know she was a robot at the time. What don't women lie about? Thanks to breakthroughs in nanotechnology and medicine, Tim is able to live forever. Eventually, the end of the world will come. Predictable. It will get very dark and very cold. The cyborgs of the future will decide to build a giant machine. The machine will use powerful lasers to focus all their beams on a single point of space-time. It will get very hot. This will naturally make Tim very sleepy. And though he knows much better, Tim will take a nap. A window will be opened. And when he wakes up, Tim will find himself in a parallel world. I don't know if you want me to stay on the story because there are a lot of footnotes there, and there's a lot of references to different things. So I might have to keep sharing, but I'll shut up so that you can sort of respond.
Well, I think a reader might want to continue on to the footnotes right away. I laugh, man, and it's the genre seems pretty clear here. I might have understood this less if I hadn't recently seen Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
There you go.
Actually, I think I did understand this less the first time I read it because I've only seen that movie for the first time recently.
There you go.
And I also could get that he's going to parallel worlds, but he's also in a very constricted masculine psychology. And so and the narrative, I think, sort of turns that up to 11, which is actually challenging at least challenging the reader to, like, I laugh and then one good thing that satirical humor can do is you laugh and then you have to think, how do I feel about that I laughed about that, and yeah, it was all working. So like the grandfather or father figure being killed and the mother fantasy, those are pretty directly from Freud's idea of, right, the subconscious, and but seeing them actually acted out, yeah, it was funny, definitely, in the way the way the narration lays it out. especially because there's um, it's kind of a generally dry voice, and then but also the structures are like the rhythm to it makes it clear.
Mm. Okay, so there are references in there, and there was one reference that that explains the mother thing. That's not actually Freud, but is one of my favorite movies of all time, Back to the Future. So, so, so it's like a it's a time it's a parallel worlds, time travel, time paradox uh, story. Um, I mean, Freud is interesting, and certainly I thought of Freud, uh, but I was mostly I'm not that deep, so I was talking about Back to the Future. Um, and I was also referencing time travel paradoxes. So if you want to respond real quick, sure, but I do have a question. Um, have you heard of the grandfather paradox? Well, I should probably still explain what that is, though, even if you have.
Sure. Or well, do you want to go into the notes now?
Okay, that's not a bad idea. There are notes. I kind of don't want to read all of them because I could sort of explain them, but
Well, but I mean, the notes are a part of the composition, aren't they?
yes, and I welcome people to read them.
Okay.
I will share a link for people to read them. I kind of, in my mind, I was imagining people reading them maybe later if they're curious, if they want to know more about these sorts of things. Uh, but yeah, I'll sort of look through some of these notes. How many notes? They're kind of a lot. It's similar to the length of the thing. Let me talk quickly about the origin of the notes. How many notes? 25. Okay, XX5 V.
Holy crap. There are 25 notes. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but some of them are kind of quick. Some of them are lengthy, but some of them are kind of quick. Um, so I was a big like sci-fi kind of nerd, watching all the specials, like the universe, and you know, and reading going into the bookstore and getting the Michio Kaku books. Um, the most important thing to understand about the references here is it's time travel and it's talking about time travel paradox. Um, Let me talk about very quickly the origin of the notes. So I first showed this to one of our coworkers, former coworkers, Betty, and she's like, and I was explaining the story, and she was like, "This is really interesting. Why don't you write notes? Because like I didn't know any of this stuff, and it makes the story more interesting. Because I just thought it was like this silly story." Um, that's why I wrote the notes. But they are, that was kind of a little bit of a debate when I first showed this in 2009 or so at Fordham in my creative writing class. Um, it was like some people felt it was taking away from the story. Um, so, anyways, I made them end notes. They were originally footnotes. Um, I think it's probably better to read them like one sentence and then you look up the note, you read the next sentence, you look up the next note. That's how I read it. You can also read the notes afterward. So, the time travel paradoxes. The grandfather paradox, as it says in the first note, occurs when a time traveler goes into the past and kills his grandfather or one of his parents before he is born, therefore inhibiting the series of events that lead to his future birth. However, the question then becomes, and this is why it's a paradox, if the time traveler is never born because his grandfather was killed, and therefore his grandfather didn't have his father, and his father didn't have him. If he was never born, how could he have traveled into the past in the first place to kill his grandfather? Right? That's the grandfather paradox. That's the nexus of the paradox. What do you think, Marcos? Does that sound paradoxical to you, or
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to experience a version of this that takes the narrative approach of Hitchhiker's Guide. You know, where there's a story and there's a document, right? That's interspersed, uh, with the story. I think I would have, if that came up like after the first paragraph, you know, um, different font or whatever, I think I would have found the first paragraph enriched. Um, I think it actually reinforces the genre, right? Because it's like your what's going on isn't just like satirical, it's also impossible, right? Or paradoxical, at least, you know?
Hmm. I think mostly at this point in my life, I was a big Vonnegut freaking fanboy, Kurt Vonnegut. And, I had read Slaughterhouse-Five, and, I would go on to read many other books of his, but um, I think I was biting really hard off of his style, and I mimicked him hard early on. So I think, I don't know, it's kind of a cross between Vonnegut and Douglas Adams. Um, so this grandfather paradox is resolved in two ways. Um, let's see if the notes sort of cover that. So there are some references to free will, right? He feels free, right? Um, so two ways of solving that, and they basically have to do with free will. So one of the solutions to the grandfather paradox is that there is one universe and no free will. This is what Stephen Hawking referred to as, it has a really fancy name. It's called the chronology protection conjecture. And the idea is basically, in order for time travel to make sense, you can only travel back if, in so doing, the events that happen as a result of your having traveled into the past do not alter the events that allowed you to travel back into the past in the first place.
Yeah.
Hopefully that made sense
Yeah.
as a sentence. Um, Therefore, a time traveler to the past who attempts to kill his grandfather is somehow prevented from doing so, thereby not engendering an alteration of the timeline. Um, so there's this movie, The Time Machine, based on H.G. Wells' uh, eponymous novel. And in the novel, in the film, um, the guy keeps trying to rescue his wife from dying. Was it his wife? I haven't seen it in such a long time. Or girlfriend. I can't remember. He keeps trying to save her. I don't know if you've seen that movie, um, but she keeps dying. He keeps trying to save her from dying, but he saves her, and then then she gets hit by a carriage, and then something else happens. So that's one idea that resolves the paradox. Note number 3 says that the protagonist travels into parallel worlds via sleep. So all the references to sleep or closing his eyes is just a metaphor for traveling into other worlds, because that's what dreaming is.
I definitely want a version of this where the footnotes are interstitial to the narrative.
So what do you mean? Do you mean so for example, these are endnotes. What if they were just footnotes instead? So instead of at the end, they were at the foot of every page.
No, it's an interruption that, but it's an interruption that you know uh harmonizes, or not necessarily harmonizes, but that um I mean harmonized in the sense of when you put two tones together, they produce, well, each tone has overtones implied, and then you put two tones together, there are contrasting there are additional overtones. It seems like a counterpoint, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I see. I think I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, that would have, I think that would have been smoother, probably. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I listened to Betty, who I highly respect.
Hmm.
And I wrote the notes based on her suggestion and based on the fact that I mean, obviously I had a lot to say, right? There's 25 notes.
Well, Jim, let me just say that, like, I have that opinion now, um, especially hearing how you wrote the notes, right? It's a similar enough voice to that it's not like jarring, but it's also it's a different voice. It's not um yeah, it sounds like it's a narrator and a commentator,
Yeah.
scientific commentator.
Agreed. Agreed. That is kind of what I was trying to do. Yeah. I was trying to do like the scientific objective like definition on the footnotes, right? I was not trying to do the narrator on the footnotes. Um, and then with the narration, I was more in that Douglas Adams, Kurt Vonnegut mind frame.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and if you have two voices, it's also, that could be another play on the parallel theme.
Booyah. Yeah, that's interesting. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was the other solution, right? The which is the idea that I believe, and it is a belief system because I don't, you know, uh, nobody knows, right? But people can argue that the math and the science points in this direction.
Hmm.
So the other solution to the grandfather paradox is that there is a virtually endless number of universes in existence, known as the multiverse. The idea is like you either have a multiverse um, filled, a universes sort of coexisting. And so when one travels into the past, um, uh, you don't exactly travel into your past because you can't, right? Because you've altered it by traveling. The act of traveling into the past in the first place creates an alternative timeline. So that's why, like, he saw his mother, but there's a line about she didn't really seem like his mom or something like that. Um, Hence, when a time traveler alters a timeline, a new universe is instantly created, thus preserving the original timeline the time traveler came from and his timeline. So it kind of preserves it in that way. Um, so I mean, yeah, that's kind of the what I wanted to say about this. There's some references to a black hole, and at the very end, I think one thing that's important to point out is this idea about like the end of the universe. Uh, in this case, it's called the Big Freeze, right? Oh, I wrote it down. So, right, I said it was getting cold and whatever. This is the idea of the Big Freeze, the end of the universe. The most widely held scientific theory for the end of the universe, right? As the observable exponential increase in the expansion of the universe with time continues, known as metric expansion, eventually there will be no stars left in the sky and temperatures will reach absolute zero or 0 Kelvin, where individual atoms stop moving. And so nothing will be possible. No stars won't be possible. That's kind of the end of the universe. Reading through this is fascinating because I totally forgot all this stuff, and this is actually kind of new to me now. because this was such a long time ago. Okay, so anyways, there's you can read the notes if you would like. You can find the story. I will link the story in the description or in the show notes if you're listening to this on, say, iTunes or some other podcatcher. I will share the video on YouTube as well. Yeah, and so let me stop the share. So,
Jim, one other thought. One thing that you and I could do with the resources we have is do an audio version of this, and that could be a relatively easy way to combine, the footnotes into the narrative. So if you want to figure out how you want to lay that out, I could read, one or the other, the footnotes of the narrative, and you could read the other. And just having two voices, you sort of don't need to explain it, right? It could just come across. Hey, anybody who's watching this, if you think that sounds cool, make a comment about that. And then maybe Jim and I'll want to work on that.
it sounds like a great idea. There's some logistical things about how that might work, but it sounds great. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you so much. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, share. I don't know what else you could do. Hit the notification bell if you're listening on the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, do what you can to help us out. And that is greatly appreciated. Peace out, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for sharing. Make the path by walking.
alAndar, or as I like to say, alAndar.